Thanks for choosing this free Anfield Index podcast. If you'd prefer to listen to this or any of our other shows without adverts, then now's the time to check out Anfield Index Pro. With AI Pro, you can supercharge your entire listening experience. You'll not only get all of our podcasts without the ads, but you'll have them far faster with our Quick Publish feature available exclusively for subscribers. AI Pro also puts you in the heart of our sound studio, with an option to listen to many of our shows live and interact with the podcasters in real time as the shows are recording. Upgrading couldn't be easier. AI Pro is available on all popular podcast platforms, and we have our own apps for Apple and Android. Just head on over to AnfieldIndexPro.com and get started today.
Hello and welcome to Rate Don't Hate. I'm resigning soon, host Guy Drinkle, seemingly, with my new record as the host of this podcast. Bloody hell. I'm going to blame my guests, and it is clearly my next guest's fault, that game. Dave Comerford, who's been a long-standing writer on AI. How are you doing, Dave?
Well, like I was saying to you just before we started recording, I'm probably about as good as I can be in the circumstances. I mean, in terms of a debut on this show, I don't know if it's almost the worst possible time or the best, because, you know, it gets to make some sort of headline grabbing ratings, really, with some of these players. So yeah, unfortunate circumstances, really.
A good show, but we feel terrible for it. That's
effectively.
That's how it is. That's how it is. Like, I've asked everyone this so far. I mean, you've done the ratings on the site on and off for a couple of seasons now. How do you go about it? Is 5 your starting point? Is 6 your starting point? Or do you just take in the whole package and just go, he was 7, etc.? What's your thought process?
My policy with these is always it starts off as a 6 if the team wins. If not, if it's a loss or a draw, I'll probably sort of use 5 as a starting point, and that is the average. So yeah, that's my sort of always when I'm writing. If I'm doing ratings, I'd always go with that.
Yeah, we're probably about the same then. I think I said the same last week or the first episode. It much depends on the result, but I think in this game in particular, there wasn't many who stuck to the average. They either did something or, well, didn't do stuff, or did stuff that weren't meant to be, but we'll get into that as we go. Yeah, Alisson, we'll start off boringly, as we always do, and especially this season. I went with a 6 with him, and I've gone with a 6 for him all season. He just feels like he's just there at the minute. There's nothing he can do to help rescue these games, because Man United's both finishes were pretty crisp. He couldn't really do anything about it. He's just kind of a victim of the rest of the team being so below standard at the minute. So I've just went with a 6 for Alisson, because I think he made one good save. It might have been offside, the one I'm thinking of, but I can't blame him for the result, and he couldn't really do much more.
Yeah, I think Alisson is kind of in a situation now where he's probably not sort of being the hero like he was last season. That's not a criticism. It's just, you know, not sure we've seen those moments from him in terms of making a difference in terms of the result, maybe, and the outcome. But equally, he's definitely not one of the things you look at in the team at the moment and say it's an issue. I've gone with 5 for him, purely because, like I said, you know, if it's a loss, I'm going to use 5 as the starting point, and I don't think I would kind of dial up much from that. The first goal, he kind of gets, you know, he does kind of commit himself. Again, I don't think he's the biggest issue in that. I just think it's something that maybe made it slightly easier for Sancho. I thought the save that he made from Christian Eriksen was amazing, by the way. Obviously not something that people have really mentioned because it hasn't made too much of a difference, but probably, you know, one of his best sort of.
Yes, I completely forgot about that one. Yeah, that is an excellent save. Yeah.
Well, that's like I say, isn't it? It's like not something you necessarily remember, but
I remember. You don't remember the good bits.
Yeah. Well, I remember saying at the time, like, you know, that's a sort of unreal save, and I just thought I'd give that a mention. And the only other thing I'd say with Alisson is, I don't know what you think about this guy, but the second goal, I watched it back. Obviously, he finishes it near post. And the approach seemed a bit different how we approached the similar Elanga chance early in the game, which obviously hit the post. Do you think he maybe should have been a little bit further over to his right, I suppose you'd say, and sort of the left-hand side of the screen as you're watching it, to cover that off a little bit? Because it seemed like it was just a very easy avenue for him to finish. I'm not like adamant about this, I wouldn't say I'm an expert in kind of the goalkeeping side, but just looking at it, it looked a little bit strange to me.
Yeah, and I think I am a five-a-side goalkeeper, so I was the fat lad at school that got put in goal. But I have no expertise at all, really. But I think the way Alisson usually goes for 1v1s, he literally just makes himself massive, whereas I think I blocked. I don't want to rewatch the goals, but from what I remember of the Rashford one, it's not like the elitist have finished. It's not like top corner unsavable. Or maybe he's thinking it's Rashford. He's really low of confidence. I just want to block off the easy percentage save rather than the more difficult one. I'd have to rewatch it, to be fair, because that game kind of broke me yesterday. But no, it's an odd one. I think the way we watch Alisson as well, we always have the confidence of him saving 1v1s. So it might be a bit of that as well.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, he is sort of the master of a close range 1v1 situation usually. But it just kind of stuck out to me, like as I say, in that moment, and like maybe not looking like his usual technique, but fair play. I think there was a moment where Martial found himself in kind of a similar area, albeit with more defenders back, and Alisson was kind of there, as he often is, to kind of smother it a bit and push it away. So yeah, I just think a 5, and because I'm not too sort of adamant, like I say, about that being a big mistake, I wouldn't mark him down any further than that, really.
Yeah, absolutely. This is where the interesting discussions start, because I mean the midfield is probably the most negative because that's a long-standing thing, but the defence. I'll ask you this as a general sense rather than just this game to begin with. I mean the defence. Do you think there is a real issue there? Because I know with the Crystal Palace game, we had Nat there, so we were like, he doesn't fit the system, etc., etc. Whereas this game, regardless of what we think the impact of the midfield is, because we'll get to that, but Trent's looking lazier than he usually is. Van Dijk doing silly, or certainly things that look silly and silly things. Gomez was mostly fine, to be fair. And Robertson, I think it's fair to say he's kind of been on a not bad form, but just not the Robertson we've had in probably the first 3 years at Liverpool. He's just kind of meh or bad. He's not really the exciting Robertson we had for the first few years. So is the defence a huge concern, or do you put it down to other factors, maybe not pulling the weight or something like that?
It's an interesting one. I think that there are individual failings in there, like you hinted at there. I mean, Trent and Van Dijk being too casual in moments is definitely a problem. Obviously, not having Matip and Konate, who are probably, obviously Matip played against Fulham, but not having them the past couple of games isn't ideal, because probably at the moment you'd say that they're kind of the players who should be competing for the role alongside Van Dijk. And with Robertson, yeah, it's like he hasn't been particularly bad. I wouldn't say he's necessarily in decline or anything like that, but obviously there was a spell at sort of towards the start of last season where people are thinking about, should Tsimikas be in the side ahead of him? I think that died down a little bit as last season went on, because Robertson did improve, but I don't think it's, if I'm sort of thinking back to like the 2019 Robertson, for example, I don't think it's that kind of wow sort of aspect with him. But I think the problem with the defence, and defence would be in inverted commas if you were saying this, is that Liverpool's system at the moment, I think it isn't functioning entirely effectively. You've got a situation, I think, a lot of the time where if the opposition can beat the first instance of pressure, then they're running into a lot of open space, and you basically find yourself in a situation where there's so much room in behind for them to attack, and they're really just kind of running at you, and there isn't the protection there. I'm not sure the balance is there. And I think that's something that is the more kind of serious or underlying concern for me, and it was something that I kind of noticed last season. Obviously, we saw that on multiple occasions last night, and I think the best illustration was probably against Palace last week, when you have Eze basically Fabinho and Trent tried to kind of trap him by the touchline, but he just kind of goes through the middle of them. And then it's 2v2, Eze and Zaha against Phillips and Van Dijk. And obviously they get a goal out of that. So yeah, I think, the defenders individually probably need to be doing better, but also it's so much easier really for flaws to be exposed in a way when they don't have that layer of protection in front of them that they've been kind of used to having when we see this Liverpool team at its best, I'd say. So yeah, it just feels like there's a bit of a void there, to be honest, and defending that much space is a lot more difficult, I'd say. So for me, it's mostly systemic, but I agree that there are kind of individual failings within that too.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Right, let's get into it. Let's start with Gomez, because I think he's the one that's probably least to be discussed. I don't think he had the best game. He maybe had the best game out of the back four. There was a couple duels where I think he maybe lost where he should have won. I think he defended mostly fine. Maybe he could have played offside on the second one, but I think we all know what the bigger mistake was with that one. I just give him a 5 because I think he was probably the only defender who actually did an all right job on the night.
Yeah, 5 from me too. I think there was a couple of moments where he sort of dives in a bit clumsily, and his maybe tackling technique or timing isn't quite right. But the one thing I would say about Gomez is, I think of every single player on the pitch, and I include like the attackers in this, I think he was probably the best on the ball. I think he was the one, like the amount of first touches that seemed to be going astray yesterday was crazy. I think Gomez was the one who seemed to have that kind of composure in terms of bringing the ball down and picking the right pass out, which was kind of refreshing, really, with it kind of failing pretty much universally. So, yeah, I thought he was good in possession, out of possession, a couple of dodgy moments. But, yeah, I've given him kind of the highest rating in the back four too. So I'd probably agree with you on that.
Yeah. Right. Let's go with his centre-back partner, Van Dijk. The listeners have gone with a 3.7 average, which I assume maybe only the Aston Villa game could rival that. But 3.7 for Van Dijk, who is probably his worst game outside of maybe the Villa game, is a 6 out of 10. And getting 3.7 from listeners, and I went with a 4, which I think is kind of high, but I just wanted to prove a point that some people were maybe worse than him. But I think it could be anything from a 1 to a 2 or a 3. It was just so un-Van Dijk-like, tongue twister there. It's just so odd. I mean, the first goal where he stood there, maybe he's doing the right thing, but I think he has to react to the fact that Milner's been done for a dummy. He has to press out. Maybe in an ideal sense, Milner doesn't jump in and you can stay there and block off parts of the goal, but he didn't. He jumped in. You have to then go close out. He just didn't react to the situation. But beyond that big moment, I just think he was not like himself. He had the odd moment where he did Van Dijk things. I think tackling Sancho in a 1v1 situation. I think it was Sancho. It might have been Martial or someone. But he just looked panicked. And him and Milner and Henderson shouting at each other all game. You see Henderson shouting all game because he does. He's an angry Mackham. But it was just so un-Liverpool-like, and especially un-Van Dijk-like.
Yeah, I've gone a little bit lower than you, actually. I went with a 3. And really, it comes down to the defending style. And obviously, the way Van Dijk has defended has served them very well. His sort of probably unique style of defending in some respects that he's had, and obviously established himself as the best defender in the world. But, when he does engage, a lot of the time, 9 times out of 10, really, he's going to come out on top in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, he picks his moments where he's not going to do that as well. And for him, obviously, that's kind of like his calculation. And you almost don't want to question the methods too much because of the effect they've had, like I just mentioned. But yeah, the certain moments where it's like he's kind of walking a fine line, and he's walked that tightrope very well during his career. But there's been moments. I think people talked about in the Champions League final too, and obviously last night where it sort of spills over this kind of composure that he has. It spills over into being too lax, too casual, maybe even a little bit arrogant, really. And it might be one of them where he has to almost like make that adjustment to his game and be a little bit more front-footed, because there are sort of signs that it's causing Liverpool occasional issues. So yeah, it's an interesting one. It's one of them where it's like he's looked sort of bulletproof for so long, but now you just start to wonder if this sort of style has gone maybe a little bit too far in terms of this kind of almost quite lax and very chilled out approach he has to defending, really.
Yeah, maybe because we play offside so much. I know it's impossible to play offside in that situation. It's like maybe we're over reliant on that, and then once it gets to the nitty gritty of defending, maybe we've lost an edge or something like that. Because I think we all appreciate the high line and the art form that it is, and how much concentration, how much well timed defending it takes. But the sloppiness is just creeps in. What is it? Is it 7 games or 8 games now we've conceded first in? It's unacceptable especially for the quality of team we are. I mean, I wouldn't accept that in Roy Hodgson days, in Brendan Rodgers days, but the fact that it's Klopp's team and we rightfully big it up as one of the best teams in the world, if not the best team in the world on its day, and 7 games in a row we're conceding first. There is issues there. But I think that it's a collective issue. And a 3 out of 10 for Van Dijk. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? Trent, we'll move on to Trent because he's part of this as well. Dave, the question marks about his defending are always there. And sometimes I think they're harsh, and sometimes I think you can see it. But the laziness is another thing, because I'm sure people have seen the clips going around Twitter now. Their first goal, he just watches it unfold. And even the second one, I think we get caught up high and he's not the real person to blame there. But the first one, he kind of just watches it. And that just kind of pisses me off, to be honest.
I kind of wonder with Trent, like, obviously he knows his role in the team is pretty much as a playmaker first and foremost. And people, when the defensive criticisms are leveled, are kind of like, well, it doesn't really matter because overall the net impact that he has on this team is still hugely positive. And you almost look at it and wonder if that's kind of gone to his head too much. And he's like, oh, it's not really my job. People are supposed to almost cover for me because of what I can do in the other half. And that does seem to almost manifest itself a little bit in some of the defensive moments where he is reactive and he doesn't necessarily take responsibility for it. So I definitely understand that criticism. But the other thing I'd say about Trent is, so it seemed like a deliberate tactic last night. So it's not completely his fault. When he got the ball, he'd kind of just launch it from the really deep position. So we're talking like around the halfway line, as opposed to maybe going for that kind of killer pass in the final third, or sort of overlapping or underlapping in the opposition half. Like he was attempting it from almost in his own half a few times. And like I say, it was so kind of, it stood out to me so much that I'm like, he's definitely been told to do that. But the kind of inaccuracy of his passes, I mean, there was a few that were kind of near misses, but it seemed like very, very few actually hit their mark yesterday. And that's obviously a huge problem. And then, obviously it creates situations then where you're giving the ball away, and because of the issues with the midfield, then it's just effectively just giving the ball back to the opposition, setting up counter-attacking situations. So, yeah, I mean, we can talk a lot about the defensive side, and there are obviously some issues there, maybe in terms of approach, more so than anything else. But, on the ball yesterday as well, he didn't do anything to compensate for that. I mean, he might have even been as bad in possession as he was out of it, really. So, I gave him a 3 out of 10, like I did for Van Dijk.
Yeah, I went with the same 3 out of 10. And I think that may have been the only reason Van Dijk didn't get that score, is because I think Trent was probably worse and lazier than Van Dijk in situations. So I just wanted to make that a clear difference. But no, that was Trent, basically all his worst attributes put together. And the sloppiness on the ball, you can kind of forgive if he's solid defensively or he tries his hardest to get back in situations. Because let's be honest, without Thiago in the team, there's a lot of pressure on him to be the one that connects the team together, and he didn't really do that job at all. But I think there's clearly other factors in that which we'll get to. But yeah, I'd probably put the expectation on him in that situation. It just didn't work in that regard, and the defensive issues were just horrendous, really. So yeah, both gone with a 3 out of 10 there. Robertson was a weird one because he wasn't really involved, but I still feel like he had a bad game. Maybe it was just he got grouped in collectively, but I feel they didn't really attack down that side, but he didn't really get forward at all, really. So I think I went with a 4. Let me just double check. I did go with a 4.
Yeah, me too on that one. Obviously, giving Gomez a 5, saying he was probably the best of the back four. So he would kind of get the slightly higher rating, and then I don't think Robertson was as bad though as Trent and Van Dijk. So 4 is like the natural point there. I just thought it was ineffective, really. Like like you say, there was no kind of impact from him, probably at either end of the pitch. My kind of defining memory of that game in terms of him is like a ball getting whipped across to his side, and he like miscontrols it, or it just evades him, or he overhits across, all that sort of thing. Where it's just like it just isn't kind of falling for him, and he's not executing properly. And yeah, that's just what it felt like, just ineffective. It's like not especially bad, but kind of still part of the collective terrible performance, really.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I would agree with that indeed. Midfield then. Let's get Elliot out of the way because I don't want to group him in with the issues. I thought he was mostly okay in a very, very difficult situation because he just had no help, in my opinion. I went with a 5 because, again, my starting point, he had good moments, but it was a really tough situation for, I think he's still 19, for a 19-year-old. I just stuck with the 5 because I think he's probably the least of our issues in that area.
Yeah, I went with the 5 too. I think with the past couple of games with Elliot, people have looked at him and said he's kind of been a shining positive, really, amidst disappointing results. I think with me, I'm kind of looking at it, and it probably says a lot about how much I rate Elliot, really. I look at it and judge him as if he's kind of at the same level as the rest of the players in terms of experience. So then I'm not hugely like wowed by it because it's like a Liverpool starting midfielder, from that point of view. Like, I don't think he's been amazing necessarily, but I think he's had good moments in both games, bright moments, and certainly, like you say, as a 19-year-old, they are kind of commendable displays, I'd say. But yeah, it's one of them. Probably, I'm sure most people would say Cavalier was the main positive of the night, but
yeah,
if you're reaching for something else, you might say Elliot. But yeah, I don't think he was kind of. It's hard for him to do much better than he did, obviously, in the circumstances. Like I say, I don't think he kind of lit it up or anything like that by any means, but he wasn't like particularly bad. And relatively speaking, last night, that makes him pretty good.
Mm-hmm. It really does, and that's the worrying thing. Let's talk about the next two collectively, because I think we have to. Henderson and Milner. The narrative after the Palace game, and it's not one I particularly agree with, was that Fabinho needed, kind wording was rotating, but some people saying dropping for Henderson to get a chance in that 6 role. And I just didn't agree because I don't think the tackle was bad against Palace, but I think he was fine other than that. But Henderson in this game, he just had no positional discipline, which, regardless of the other stuff, like touch like a beach ball, stupid punts up into the air for no reason. But if he just stayed positionally disciplined, it could have helped so much. Whereas he was running beyond, he was covering, he was overlapping on the right, he was wandering off to the left. There was a moment where he was playing left centre back, and the midfield had like 40 yards of no one in it. It's just, what the hell's going on? And Milner tried his arse off, and that's commendable. But this is Liverpool, and Milner wasn't a first-team player in 2017 when we bought all the new midfielders. It just kind of sums up, maybe stagnation, maybe it is the injuries, let's be honest, but maybe the lack of investment or development in this area. Maybe we hoped Curtis Jones would have developed, but he's obviously injured, so it doesn't really matter. But it just sums up that Henderson's a debate, whatever, in the fan base in general. But we've got a 19-year-old and a 36-year-old starting two of our 3 games of the season. It's just unideal. Even if they played well, it'd be unideal. But this game, these two, I don't know, it just seemed to not work. And I don't think this midfield worked when they were both in their peak. So I'm not really surprised by it, and it's just kind of getting annoying now.
I think, with this midfield, sometimes you see with Liverpool's attack, like I think we saw it last season, they kind of rotate around and it causes defenders problems. And then the midfield yesterday seems to be trying to do that. But it's like, I'd rather my midfield didn't do that. Actually, I'd rather they were kind of a bit more fixed in their roles to provide that security. That was non-existent. And maybe Henderson thought it was going to be fluid because he isn't normally a number 6. But I agree with what you're saying in terms of there aren't enough midfielders at Liverpool who are in their primes. I think the only one you could kind of make the case for, I suppose, is Keita, but given the lack of availability with him, we don't really reap the rewards of that. I think the rest of them, actually, I suppose there's Fabinho too, but so can't be too harsh on him. And you said, I would have started him. I don't think he's been as bad as some supporters have made out up to this point in the season. But there are too many who are kind of aging or still kind of getting up to a certain level, and that's maybe where an addition could have been really, really helpful, I suppose. But I'll start with Henderson. I thought it was looking like a 4 from him, to be honest, like kind of Robertson level. Like I don't think he was performing terribly. But then obviously what happens with the second goal, just a really, really poor moment from not even like a Liverpool player to do that, but just like any sort of
Sunday League,
any sort of decent level player there to do that. And the whole goal itself was just absolutely horrendous to watch, to be honest, from a team into standard. It was like watching an implosion. So 3 for Henderson. Milner, I've gone 2 for Milner. I've got the lowest for him. I thought he was woeful in that game. And you mentioned about the endeavour and stuff like that, and it's almost a given with him. And people have praised him for sort of shouting at Van Dijk, etc. But like the complete and utter lack of any technical skill in that performance was absolutely incredible. I couldn't believe what I was watching. Just like, he was making some positive runs into areas, but it's like he's not going to be able to do anything when he gets there. When he gets the ball, it's just like it's just a level of clumsiness. And Milner has his moments still, to be fair, and he has games and substitute appearances where he makes a positive impact. So I think yesterday wasn't necessarily, that's not a reflection of the player he is at the moment. That was a particularly bad example, really. But yeah, I found it really, really difficult to watch, and I was surprised that he lasted past half time based on how bad he was in the first half alone, I suppose. And it's like you could make the case that he looked like a 36-year-old on reduced terms playing at Old Trafford in a Premier League game, and it was kind of the inevitable result. But it was worse than that. Like, it's like I say, this isn't who Milner is at the moment. I think he's a much better player than he showed last night, still, and a much more maybe valuable player in some respects. But yeah, last night, just because he's 36 doesn't mean he's immune from having an absolute stinker, and that's what it was. I thought he was probably the worst player for us yesterday, and that's obviously reflected in the score that I've given him.
Yeah, I went with 2 for both of them. just collectively, because we know how our midfield works. Fabinho defends, he kind of does the central and will cover either side. But Thiago sits there, doesn't go too far forward and helps out defensively, and then the right-sided one tends to be more attacking. Was Elliott expected to do the defending in this one? Just neither of them seemed to have a clue what they were doing. You went free with Henderson, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a 3 for him, yeah.
I've got a spreadsheet going. I see the averages at the end of the season for our guests. But yeah, I think they're both useful. I think Henderson's criminally out of form. I do agree. Milner just needs to be a sub. I think he needed to be a sub for a while, but and by a while I mean years. But Henderson needs to wake up, really. I think we mentioned Fabinho being out of form, but maybe the narrative and stuff like that, and the media, whatever, doesn't like to criticise him too much or something. Whatever the Twitter story is, but the simple fact is Henderson needs to improve, because he's not played well as the 8 for a while, and people were always saying he's a very good as the 6. He had his game in the 6, and he was dreadful. So yeah, I went with a 2 for both of them. It's just a worry, that area, because by the sounds of it, Naby's injured again. I thought it was one of them bullshit injuries. Oh, he's injured, and then he would have been sold in a week, and then we hopefully would have brought someone in, but seemingly is a legit injury, so shock horror there. We don't normally preview stuff here, but it's such a position of concern. What would you do for Bournemouth? Bearing in mind it is Bournemouth, would you stick with? I'm guessing Fabinho comes back and Elliott should keep his place, but that third spot, do we just roll with Carvalho and attack a team that should be, let's be honest, an unfair relegation fodder?
It's difficult. People are talking about making a lot of changes to the team, I should say, to inspire a reaction, but I wouldn't want to go too far to the point where I'm playing people together and it's not balanced, so they don't have the kind of understanding with each other, and that creates its own set of issues. Obviously, the way it's looking, the only available midfielders, I think I'm right in saying, are basically the 4 that were involved yesterday, because obviously, Jones, Oxlade-Chamberlain, Keita, Thiago, all injured, and then you obviously got Carvalho who can play there too, or in the front line. So I would probably go with, I've been really hoping to see a Fabinho, Elliott, Keita midfield. I don't think Klopp would have done it, but obviously, Keita's injured now, so that's off the table. I'll probably go with Fabinho, Elliott, and I suppose Henderson in the other position, but it's just not.
He's never really played the left, does he?
It's not really ideal at all, but the options are so restricted. And I just don't necessarily feel like there's enough. I mean, the balance wasn't great yesterday, let's be clear, but I'm not sure there's enough sort of defensive cover that would be provided either by Fabinho, Elliott and Carvalho, and that maybe just reflects kind of obviously the profile of players that they are. You've got Elliott, who's played a lot of football as a winger, Carvalho, who's kind of a number 10. So really you've got kind of a winger / attacker midfielder and a number 10 playing in front of a defensive midfielder. Doesn't necessarily feel like it would work to me, but with it being a game that we're going to be so dominant in, who knows, Klopp might take the risk. So yeah, that's probably what I go with. But you asking me that question and me giving that answer kind of
sums it up.
Yeah, it makes me realise kind of the depth of the issue at the moment.
So the real answer is pray for a signing in the week.
Exactly.
Yeah, maybe we change formation or something. I think Klopp did mention he would have played 2 in midfield, but we didn't have the attacking options. But maybe he sees Bournemouth for somewhere Carvalho can play as the 10 or on the left, and we tinker about with the team a bit in that way, and maybe that'd suit. I think it did unfairly drop Elliott, but maybe then you can play Henderson and Fabinho in a 2. But again, Henderson doesn't really play in a 2, but needs must at the minute. But anywho, it's not a pretty picture. Hopefully Naby was transferitis and we can just play him, but probably not. Let's get into the attack. We'll start off with the 2 I was nearly going to say positive there, but okay ones. Diaz and Moore, they were in such a difficult situation for me because we'll come on to Firmino in a sec. He basically had to play midfield, which meant there was no one in the middle to do attacking stuff. So we were basically playing like 4-4-2, but the widest two you've ever seen in your life. What did you make of both of these? Because it was a tough day. Mo ends up with a goal, and Diaz in the first half maybe was probably the only positive.
Yeah, with Salah, it was definitely headed for a 5 or maybe even a 4, I'd say. But I've given him a 6 out of 10 because he scored, basically, for that simple reason. I think it was obviously that long running battle with Malacia on that side, which Malacia did quite well in.
To be fair, yeah.
And I think with both players, and it was something that they mentioned in commentary, it was a lot of the issues were kind of like positional, and obviously they would ideally like to be influencing the game from other areas, but maybe they felt like that was the only way they were really going to be able to get on the ball, which says a lot. So there was kind of, it was almost like a domino effect of problems that were created, really. Diaz, you see, I've got 4 written down here, which feels harsh, but I mean, maybe I'd push that to a 5, but no, you know what? I'll stick with a 4 just because the point I wanted to make about him is that he was good in the first half and he was bright, and based on that he probably would deserve a 5. But I do feel, and I think this happened against Fulham and definitely happened against Palace, by the way, because I know he was very, very sort of uplifting for the team in the second half. But yeah, I thought in the first half of the game, or certainly before that moment, he was really struggling.
I agree with that, to be fair.
I just think that he's having periods in games that are too long where he's quiet, and obviously he can be explosive in spells, but I want to see the kind of sustained 90-minute performance from him at the moment. So yeah, on that basis, and because I think it is a bit of a recurring issue, I'd probably give him a 4, which if I'm going to look at any of my scores so far and say, I feel like I'm being harsh there, it would be that one, but I suppose I'm allowed 1 or 2 harsh ones in the circumstances.
Very much so. Very much so. When a 2 out of 10 is not seen as harsh, I think you can be harsh to other people. Yeah, Diaz is a funny one because I think everyone is so over the moon with him since he signed, because he has been mostly excellent, but he has started this season strangely, because I think the natural comparison is not with the Mane that just left. It's the peak Mane of 2019 where that bloke was relentless. It was 90 minutes of basically being Superman. And maybe that's an impossible standard to live up to, but you mentioned it there, we see it in Diaz. There's spells where he does do the Mane stuff where he'll skin 3 people and score a worldie, but then he'll get past the ball, not really do much with it, and then we don't see him for 30 minutes. So I do agree it is a concern, but maybe the least of our concerns considering the rest of our ratings. Yeah, I went with the same. I give Diaz a 5, but yeah, I fully understand the 4, to be fair. And Mo a 6, similar to you. It would have been lower, but he got the goal. It was a scruffy goal. It was an un-Mo-like goal, but he got the goal, so that's good for my fantasy Premier League. That's about it. Bobby Firmino then, Dave. What? He's third choice striker, and he's playing because the idiot headbutted someone last week, to be fair, and Jota's obviously injured. But man, it's sad watching him, isn't it?
It is. I mean, to start with Nunez, first of all, you are right. That obviously maybe isn't something that isn't being talked about too much because he wasn't actually involved, but you really saw how much that red hurt us, not only in terms of not having him available as the option to target Martinez. I mean, Martinez had a really good game last night because he was doing the things that he wanted to do and not being put in uncomfortable situations, which you would have been able to do definitely with Nunez. And that hurt us. And the other way it hurt us was having to play Firmino, unfortunately, because the difficult truth with Firmino, and there was a point where he is my favourite player at Liverpool, so it does kind of hurt, is that I think he peaked a long time ago. I think he peaked in about 2018. There was a season there where he scored about 27 goals. I think he scored a ridiculous amount of goals.
I think that was 17-18, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah, it was. And then I remember the season after there were sort of one or two questions. And then the season we won the league, I'm pretty sure he had this huge sort of Anfield drought. I remember him scoring against Atletico Madrid, and that team was that like his only Anfield goal.
Wasn't it extra time as well, where he missed like 3 sitters in normal time that would have won the game?
Yeah, exactly. So I think you can kind of trace it back to there, and since then it's been obvious, and it has been a shadow of his former self. And yeah, I just wonder sort of how useful he is to us at the moment. What is he kind of offering? I mean, there's moments I think where he can sort of connect the play together, where he drops deep and he makes that pass, but it's all well and good almost dropping deep to receive the ball if you're then going to give the ball away with a sloppy pass or a sloppy touch. And Firmino's ball retention is absolutely horrible at the moment. Like, I bet you look at it, like you look at Firmino's FB ref profile, it's just green all over the place. But like, it's just mental, because I feel like the stats will look okay for him. But my prediction would be that his passing accuracy was about 35% yesterday, because, and certainly his duels was probably like in the gutter as well, because he can't seem to wait or direct passes properly at the moment, which kind of defeats the point, I think, of being a false nine. Like, the frequency with which he messes those up is alarming. And then on top of that, also, he won't shoot. Even when he's in position to shoot, he doesn't want to. He's not very reliable in front of goal. And he's getting like knocked off the ball all the time as well. Like, in terms of build, he's kind of decent, and it's like you expect him to be a bit stronger. So many issues popping up with him, to be honest. And sometimes, I read social media and I'm like, I feel like I'm not seeing something everyone else is seeing when they praise him at the moment. And it is sad. But like I say, obviously third choice centre forward, stylistically, he does offer something different to the other two. But in terms of performance levels, how much is that actually going to benefit Liverpool is my concern. So having said all of that, I've gone with a generous 3 out of 10 for him, because I don't think he was quite as bad as Milner. So yeah, if Diaz was harsh, I think that one's a little bit kind, because for me, it was probably, in terms of the players I was most sort of frustrated and angry with during the game and just kind of couldn't believe what I was watching, it was Milner and Firmino. And yeah, it's just a shame, really, because it was an opportunity for him after he played so badly against Fulham to prove that he does still have value. But there's absolutely no arguments at the moment, I think, to give him a new contract, unless we're talking a massive wage reduction, really. That's just my opinion.
Fully agree. He looks like an MLS-ready player to me. Or maybe, I don't think he ever really had a reputation in Brazil, but if he ever wants to go back there, it's looking like one of them players who needs to drop out of basically European leagues, unless the Eredivisie or something like that. But yeah, he certainly looks like he's going to start again, isn't he? I was going to ask you, maybe we play Carvalho in the front three, but he won't. He'll play Bobby. But he looks like a League Cup player for us at the minute, and an FA Cup player, which is sad as anything, because, as you mentioned, I think he was everyone's favourite player at some stage, and he's just not that guy anymore. But in this game, I think it was tough for him, because we mentioned the struggles with the midfield, and we know one of his strengths is dropping, or previous strengths, we should reiterate, is dropping deep and helping the midfield and connect. But he was dropping deep and basically playing midfield. Maybe sometimes you just got to let them struggle and just hope there's a counter-attack or something, because we had no threat, we had no structure in the attack, and that, I think that's down to Bobby. As you said, I've got his sofa score up here, and apparently, I don't believe this, 85.2% accurate passes, which feels like a lie to me, but maybe he stat padded just before the end of the game.
I did say that the stats just look the stats always look really good for him, much better than he looks on the eye. It's quite mad, actually.
Well, according to SofaScore, Firmino was a 7 out of 10. Henderson was a 7 out of 10. Do you want to know who our second highest rated player was behind Mo?
It's going to be a really baffling one, isn't it? It's not like Robertson or someone like that, is it?
It's Trent.
It's
It is Trent.
Almost.
7.1.
Wow.
And Elliot was our worst. No, Diaz was our worst. Elliot was our second worst. Yeah, sometimes your stats, you just got to... I know we have UP, which is the champion part of Anfield Index, but they've got to... They know themselves. You've got to go with the eye test as well at times, and good Lord, he is... he's not at any... I'll ask it anyway. Would you run with Carvalho in the attack rather than Bobby at the minute?
Maybe. I mean, it's one of them. He's not done anything to justify playing, but is he still the least worst option at the present moment? There's also an argument where, what if you did Fabinho, Milner, Carvalho in midfield, put Elliot on the right, put Salah through the middle, and have Diaz on the left, and you just have the three of them rotating. That could be an option, maybe, if you did want to mix it up. Or maybe
think about it. To be fair, like, he's playing midfield anyway. Might as well start him there.
Yeah, and Fabinho, maybe Fabinho Henderson in a 2, front 4. Firmino plays number 10 behind Salah. But again, people talk about Firmino as a number 10, and it's something I've like written about as well. And you just wonder. I mean, on paper, he has the quality to do it, certainly, but these things that I'm talking about and that are becoming increasingly clear now, of him not being able to do that sort of stringing passes together role that he does when he sort of drops deep to receive the ball. I mean, you wonder how much of a difference that would actually make. But yeah, it seems mad to say that he probably will be in the team on Saturday on the basis of that, but just does reflect the extent of our injury problems at the moment.
Yeah, and I think isn't Newcastle after Bournemouth as well? So
in midweek game, yeah,
midweek.
Which is far from ideal for us. Yeah.
Jesus. At least Liverpool get to ruin my week twice. God, how time changes. Yeah, sad with Firmino. Quick word on the subs. I think you mentioned that the start Carvalho was probably the bright light. What did I give Carvalho? I think I went with a 6. Yeah, I went with a 6. I went with a 6 for Fabinho as well. I think he came on and just basically just played midfield because no one else did. And Tsimikas I just left blank because he didn't really have the time to do anything. So, anything to add on the subs?
No, I've gone with I went for five for Fabinho and Tsimikas. I think Fabinho didn't, I wouldn't say change the pattern of the game too much, but it was kind of set in stone what it was going to be at the end anyway. With United just kind of protecting the result. I actually gave Carvalho a 7 because of how positive he was, and I think he was probably the reason that we managed to make it a bit close at the end and inspire maybe the slightest bit of hope that we might be able to get something from the game.
Certainly his best cameo.
Yeah, definitely, and the most encouraging one. And you also look at it and it makes you, I think, having watched Milner and Henderson in that game and the technical errors they'd made, it was refreshing to see him as well, and being able to kind of link up and maneuver out of tight spaces, all that sort of thing. Obviously involved in one of the goals as well. So yeah, I think he deserves a 7, which I suppose would make him the man of the match, even though he only played was it about 15 minutes towards the end of the game?
He came on the 73rd minute.
Right. So yeah, about 20 minutes all told. So yeah.
Just about. Yeah, I'd probably agree. I think, God, man of the match for somebody who's played for that little. Good Lord, out of the starters, I think it's just Salah because he scored. That's probably about it. But yeah, I think Carvalho, it is rightfully it. The listeners went with him as man of the match as well. He's got an average of 6.6. Other people who've in similar veins, Mo with a 6.4, Diaz with a 6. Did I give? I don't think I gave out the midfield averages. Milner and Henderson got an average from listeners of 1.7. Oh dear, that sums up that game. Not pretty. Final thoughts then, Dave, before we wrap up.
Well, I mean, what can you say, really? Like I say, it's the question now of how many changes does he make for Bournemouth? Does he try and inspire the reaction from the players he has by sort of maybe hammering home principles again and basics really that weren't adhered to, or does he make some sort of pretty drastic changes? I suppose that is the big question. But yeah, last night it was us that looked like Manchester United, really. Out of the two teams, and we were the ones who were displaying the issues with sort of attitude, which is a really alarming thing. But listen, I think people and the performance, as we've kind of gone through in those ratings show, was terrible. I don't think people need to be worried about something crazy happening like Liverpool missing out on top four or anything like that. But yeah, it's just pain at the moment, and the injuries are obviously heightening that, but also issues are being exposed that needs to be addressed as well, pretty serious ones. So yeah, all things considered, pretty miserable at the moment. But I suppose with so many players being out and players who would have started yesterday, there is maybe the tiniest sort of glint of optimism in there at the same time, that we will be able to kind of, once we get a couple of those back, and hopefully once Klopp can kind of, drill into the players the kind of principles, make them remember why they're good.
You are good at football. Stop being crap.
Effectively, that we can hopefully put a bit of a run together. Because honestly, at the moment, the joy that I'm finding in football it's a very sort of bitter view that I have at the moment. It's like the results on Sunday, like Chelsea getting beat, and then the United results the previous weekend. It's like, at the moment, I'm just an anti-fan because I don't have anything to cheer on myself. I'm just
the City game was the best I've felt about football in a while.
Exactly. I'm just relishing almost the suffering of others at this point. So I hope I've got something to actually cheer about for my own team soon.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to jinx. I don't want to say anything else bad about Bournemouth. It will come back and bite me. But we're back on a Saturday 3:00 kickoff, I believe. So maybe, I don't think the players will give a toss about whether we're on telly or not, because they're always on telly, apart from in England. Maybe that's playing at a normal hour helps with that, or something like that. We pray, but we've got to get the season started on Saturday. I think that's how you word it. It's just, if we don't beat Bournemouth, like even if we draw, God, then we can have discussions about the top four, I think. But yeah, hopefully Bournemouth is the start of a run, because it has to be, really. But that's it for this week's Rate Don't Hate. Hopefully next week I have a win to talk about, which can just be boring and we can give everyone a minimum of 6 and there's nothing to mourn about. Please, for the love of God, let everyone be a 6 out of 10. That's what I'll finish up with. But thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you, everyone who put in their ratings on the site. Gives us a bit more of a wide-ranging thing to talk about, and I will incorporate more, but I'm still getting used to hosting this show. There's too many tabs open, God damn it. But thank you, everyone, for listening. Goodbye.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this Anfield Index show. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel so future podcasts find their way to your device automatically. There's nothing quite like fan engagement, and we'd love to know what you think of anything discussed on this show. The best way to get in touch is over on our free Discord community, where both podcasters and listeners debate the hottest LFC topics 24/7. Sign up free now at anfieldindex.com/Discord. You won't regret it. You can also follow us on Twitter at Anfield Index, and find us on Facebook by searching for Anfield Index. Oh, and before you go, we'd love it if you could leave us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast app. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it means the world to the people who create these free shows.